Imagine a world where, you know, your company's data isn't just passively tracking what your customers buy, like it's actively, dynamically influencing how they behave in real time.
Yeah, literally shaping their decisions on the fly.
Right. Or picture this massive, incredibly complex factory where the physical equipment actually has a digital twin. Basically a complete virtual replica that's constantly practicing and running simulations in the cloud.
Solving problems before they even happen on the factory floor.
Exactly. And, oh, if that isn't quite sci-fi enough for you, consider this. NASA is currently installing a 4G mobile network on the moon.
I mean, it totally sounds like the plot of a sci-fi movie, but everything you just mentioned is either happening right now in enterprise environments or, it's in late-stage active development.
The timeline isn't 20 years out. It's literally today.
Yeah, it's right now.
And that is exactly what we're exploring in this session. So welcome, everyone, to Managing the Future, the MIS podcast. And a really special welcome to you, the Dr. Sampak College of Business students at Tarleton State University.
Absolutely. And welcome to any other business majors or, working professionals joining us to level up their management operations.
Today, we're doing a deep dive into Module 28, Emerging Technologies 2025. And just so you know, all the insights, frameworks, and examples we're unpacking today are drawn directly from your source material.
Right. That's Connect Master, Management Information Systems by Richard Tedman and Casey Wilhelm, published by McGraw-Hill 2026.
It's a massive, sprawling topic, but before we get completely lost in lunar telecommunications and digital supply chains, we really need to build a bridge from where we were last time.
Yeah, we have to ground this. So in Module 27, we explored software procurement and development in business, basically looking at the mechanics of how a business actually gets the software it needs.
Right, the whole build versus buy debate. We talked about the decision matrix for purchasing packaged software like Microsoft Office versus customizing something like Salesforce.
Or just taking on the massive task of building a proprietary system completely from scratch in-house.
Yeah, which is a huge undertaking.
Yeah.
And we didn't just look at the software itself, right? We looked at the actual frameworks used to manage those projects safely.
Exactly. We discussed the product development lifecycle, the PDLC, which handles the broad business strategy, and then the software development lifecycle, the SDLC, which really gets into the absolute weeds of coding and testing.
We compared the highly structured waterfall model to the really flexible agile model.
Yeah.
And even touched on the hybrid spiral model.
Right. Plus, how to actually roll a new system out, whether you do a risky big bang release where everyone just switches at once or a phased release.
Or like a parallel run where you operate the old and new systems simultaneously.
Exactly. And that serves as the perfect foundational setup for today's deep dive. Because, you simply cannot leverage these emerging technologies like AI or IoT or those digital twins without a really solid software procurement strategy in place.
You need a robust IT infrastructure first.
Right. Module 27 gave you the how-to blueprint. Module 28 shows you what you'll actually be building or buying tomorrow.
The stakes are definitely getting a lot higher for anyone in management. But before we jump into the deep end of the tech pool, just a quick reminder to you, our listener. Please take a second to like, subscribe, follow, share, and leave a comment on this deep dive.
Yeah, it really helps you stay updated and just join the ongoing conversation with your fellow students and professionals.
Okay, so let's unpack this. We're going to start with the technologies that are most immediately reshaping daily operations and consumer interactions. And to do that, we have to start with something called the Internet of Behaviors, or IoB.
Yeah, so to understand the Internet of Behaviors, you first have to have a firm grasp on the Internet of Things, the IoT.
Right, which we hear about all the time.
Exactly. IoT is that vast global network of physical devices connected to the Internet, constantly exchanging data. Your smartwatch, your smart thermostat, sensors on a delivery truck.
Just collecting environmental and operational data.
Right. But the Internet of Behaviors, IoB, takes that infrastructure a massive step further. It integrates the raw data from all those IoT devices, but then combines it with your online activities.
Wait, like your social media?
Yeah, social media interactions, your purchasing history, and your real-time GPS locations.
Let me stop you there just to make sure I'm tracking. So IoB isn't a new piece of hardware, right?
Yeah.
It's just pulling from everywhere.
Everywhere, every digital footprint a person leaves behind. It's the synthesis of all that disparate data.
Got it.
And it uses that highly integrated profile to deeply understand, predict, and ultimately influence human behavior. So in business terms, it moves data analytics from being strictly descriptive,
which is like a rear view mirror, right? Just telling you what already happened.
Exactly. It moves it from descriptive to highly prescriptive. Prescriptive analytics tells a business how they can actually change what happens next.
Okay, here's where I need to ask a hard question because this feels like it crosses a boundary. As a business student looking at marketing, where is the line between helpful customization and just creepy manipulation?
It's a very valid concern.
Like, is IoB just a fancy academic phrase for highly targeted advertising? Or is the mechanism fundamentally different?
It is fundamentally different in both its scope and its objective. The objective isn't just to show you an advertisement. It's to use these insights to drive specific, measurable behaviors in the physical world.
Can you give me a concrete example of how that works?
Sure. So targeted advertising is showing you a banner ad for running shoes because you Googled running shoes. But the Internet of Behaviors is integrating the GPS data from your phone that shows you go to the gym 3 days a week.
Okay.
And then combining that with your smartwatch data that verifies your sustained heart rate while you're there, and then cross-referencing that with your social media posts about training for a 5K.
Wow. So the system has a complete, holistic picture of my actual physical habits, not just my search history.
Yes. And here's the prescriptive part. A health insurance company could use that specific IoB profile to offer you dynamically adjusting hyper-personalized premiums.
Oh, wow.
Right. They might send you a push notification saying, your premium will drop by 5% next month if you maintain that exact heart rate for 2 more gym sessions.
That is wild. They are actively incentivizing and guiding your behavior based on real-time biometric data.
Exactly. It completely changes the relationship between a company and a consumer.
It really does. I mean, from a management perspective, if you run that insurance company, you're actively reducing your payout risk because healthier clients cost less.
Right.
But the textbook notes that balancing this with consumer privacy concerns is going to be a massive management challenge, right?
Absolutely massive. The regulatory compliance alone is staggering. We'll actually touch on some privacy models later, but for now, just understand that the potential to customize the customer experience using IoB is really unprecedented.
Okay, so let's shift our focus from tracking human behavior to tracking and optimizing machine behavior. The textbook spends a lot of time on digital twin technology. I mentioned this in the hook with the factory example, but I really want to understand the mechanics.
Sure.
Walk me through how a digital twin actually functions.
So think of a digital twin as a highly dynamic, living software representation of a piece of physical equipment, or even an entire physical system.
But it's not just like a 3D drawing, right?
No, we need to be really clear on that. It's not a static picture on a screen or a CAD file. A true digital twin perfectly emulates the original physical materials, the exact structural measurements, and the real-time operational behavior under stress.
Wait, but how does the software model know how the physical machine is currently behaving? Like, a blueprint doesn't know if a machine is overheating.
And that is exactly what separates a digital twin from a standard model. The answer is sensors.
Back to IoT.
Exactly. Smart, internet-connected components on the physical machine gather vast amounts of operational data continuously. Temperature, vibration, throughput speed, friction, you name it.
And all that telemetry goes straight to the cloud.
Right. And the digital twin software processes that incoming data in real time. Because the virtual model is paired with the physical asset, the twin continuously learns and updates its own state to match reality perfectly.
Okay, I see the connection now. So if I'm the operations manager of, say, a massive automotive plant, how do I actually use this? What's the ROI?
The ROI is in risk-free simulation and predictive maintenance. Let's say you want to introduce a brand new, really fast workflow to increase production by 15%.
Which usually means testing it and breaking things.
Right. In the past, you'd run a physical test, which risks breaking a multi-million-dollar machine and stopping the whole assembly line. But with a digital twin, you just run that simulation on the virtual model. You push the twin to its breaking point.
Oh, wow. So I can see if the new speed causes a thermal bottleneck or degrades a gear entirely in the virtual space.
Yep. Without ever stopping actual production on the factory floor. The digital twin can generate solutions and workflow improvements before a single physical part is touched.
That saves tens of millions in unexpected downtime.
Exactly. It completely shifts a business from a reactive maintenance model fixing things after they break to a proactive predictive model.
That is a huge competitive advantage for logistics or manufacturing.
Yeah.
And, speaking of physical logistics, if we're optimizing the warehouse, we have to talk about how the goods actually leave the warehouse.
Right, autonomous transport.
Yeah, the textbook details intelligent infrastructure and specifically mentions companies like Otto, Einride, and Embark that are actively deploying self-driving commercial trucks.
Yes. This is a critical evolution in supply chain management. We're talking about Class 8 commercial trucks designed to travel long distances on highways without a human behind the wheel.
And the core technology there is LiDAR, right? Light detection and ranging.
Correct.
I hear LiDAR all the time with consumer cars, but how does it actually tell a semi-truck where the road is?
So it's essentially a pulsed laser system. The LiDAR unit spins and sends out millions of laser light pulses per second. Those pulses bounce off surrounding objects, cars, guardrails, pedestrians, and return to the sensor.
And it measures the time it takes for the light to bounce back.
Exactly. By measuring that time, the computer builds a highly precise, continuously updating 3D map of the environment. That massive stream of spatial info feeds into the onboard computer to keep the truck on course.
But how does the computer actually turn the steering wheel?
Through a drive-by-wire system. There's no physical mechanical linkage between the steering wheel and the axles like in an older car.
So it's all electronic.
Right. The computer sends electronic signals to a control box that physically operates the brakes, throttle, and steering actuators.
Okay, but one thing that always strikes me about self-driving tech, these trucks aren't in a vacuum. Like, a truck driving perfectly safely can still get hit by a human driver running a red light.
Right, which is exactly where V2X Communication comes in.
V2X being vehicle to everything.
Yes. While autonomous driving relies on the truck's own sensors, V2X is about the truck communicating with the rest of the world. It's early in deployment, but the goal is to network a vehicle's sensor data with other vehicles.
How does that look in practice, though?
So if one autonomous truck's LiDAR detects a hazard, say a mattress falls off a car in the middle lane, that truck doesn't just brake. It instantly transmits that hazard data to all the other connected vehicles miles behind it.
Oh, so the trailing cars can adjust speed before they can even see the mattress.
Exactly. V2X also connects the vehicle to regional weather services, municipal traffic cameras, and first responder networks.
And it connects to the actual physical streets, too. The text dives into intelligent intersections. If vehicles are talking to everything, they must be talking to the stoplights.
Yes, intelligent intersections are designed specifically to alleviate urban traffic congestion, which is a massive drain on supply chain time and fuel.
Right.
They use C2X car-to-everything technology along with highly advanced smart traffic lights.
So an intelligent intersection is basically like a real-time air traffic controller, but for city streets, talking to every single car simultaneously.
That's a perfect way to visualize it. The intersection itself has its own array of LiDAR, radar, and optical cameras.
Because not everything on the road has a transmitter, right? Like pedestrians or older cars.
Exactly. It has to identify legacy, human-driven cars and cyclists. It processes all that movement and communicates optimal speeds and light change timings to the approaching connected vehicles using DSRC.
ESRC.
Dedicated short-range communications. It's a highly secure, high-speed wireless channel allocated specifically for automotive safety.
If I'm a business professional looking at this from a macro level, this completely revolutionizes supply chain logistics. I mean, think about it. If your trucking fleet doesn't have a human driver who legally needs to sleep 10 hours a day, shipping times are cut in half.
Labor costs plummet.
Yes. And urban retail planning completely changes if traffic congestion is algorithmically eliminated by these intersections. Delivery windows become perfectly predictable. We're talking about rewriting the fundamental rules of physical commerce.
And that rewrite includes the point of sale itself, how we actually pay for things when they arrive. The text brings up facial recognition payment technology as a huge, growing trend.
Paying with your face. I know smartphones use this to unlock, but using it at a retail checkout seems like a much bigger leap.
The mechanism is straightforward but highly secure. A consumer's biometric facial information is mapped and stored in a secure database linked to their financial accounts.
So you just walk up to the checkout and it scans you.
Basically, the camera scans your face, matches it against the database, and authorizes the transaction. And crucially, modern systems use a rigorous liveness test.
Liveness test, like checking if you're a real person.
Right. It uses depth sensors and infrared analysis, so the system can't be tricked by someone just holding up a high-res photo or video of your face.
It definitely provides ultimate frictionless convenience. But again, putting on my manager hat, this raises massive privacy and security concerns. I mean, a lot of consumers might vehemently reject having their biometric data tied to their bank accounts on some retailer's server.
Oh, absolutely. The data breach liability for a business holding that biometric data would be catastrophic.
Right, because you could issue a customer a new credit card number if a database is hacked, but you can't issue them a new face.
Exactly. Businesses will have to weigh the speed of checkout against the immense cost and liability of securing that biometric data.
It really highlights how technology removes friction but adds complex liabilities.
Definitely.
And speaking of removing the human element, we aren't just talking about self-driving trucks. We're talking about the physical manipulation of goods. The text brings up Flexif Robotics, a company developing what they call adaptive robots.
Right. So traditional industrial robots, like the massive arms building cars, are incredibly strong and precise, but they're completely blind and unfeeling.
If a part is out of place, it just smashes it.
Exactly. Adaptive robots fundamentally change this. They combine advanced optical sensors with incredibly nuanced force sensing and disturbance rejection capabilities.
What does disturbance rejection actually mean in a warehouse setting?
It means the robotic arm can physically feel resistance. If it's trying to insert a peg into a hole and the alignment is off by a millimeter, a traditional robot forces it and breaks the part.
But the adaptive one.
It feels the resistance, calculates the spatial error in real time, and subtly adjusts its grip and angle to slide the peg in smoothly. It acts much more like a human arm with tactile feedback while keeping the power of an industrial machine.
Wow. So if we take a step back and look at this whole first section, we have trucks driving themselves, intersections coordinating hundreds of cars, digital twins running constant simulations, and adaptive robots analyzing tactile feedback on the fly.
It's a massive amount of data.
Which brings us to an unavoidable question.
Mhm.
How on earth are the underlying IT systems evolving to support this? Because this level of processing requires massive instant computing power.
And that brings us perfectly to the second major theme in the source material, the engine of tomorrow. You're entirely right to focus on the computing bottleneck. The biggest enemy of these real-time systems is latency.
Latency is simply the time delay before a transfer of data begins following an instruction, right?
Exactly.
If I click a link on a website and it takes 2 seconds to load, that 2-second delay is latency. Annoying for web browsing, but in a self-driving car, which the text notes can have over 200 interconnected CPUs, latency is literally life or death.
Let's look at the physics of it. A self-driving truck going 70 miles an hour is covering over 100 feet per second.
Okay.
If that truck's LiDAR detects a stalled car, it cannot package that sensor data, send it over a cellular network to a centralized cloud server 1,000 miles away, wait for the server to calculate the braking force, and wait for the signal to travel 1,000 miles back.
Right. By the time the signal returns, the truck has already crashed.
Exactly. The speed of light through fiber optics is fast, but not fast enough for real-time autonomy.
So what's the solution? Do we just put a mini cloud server in the trunk of the car?
It's essentially yes. And that is why edge computing is so absolutely critical to the future of business. Edge computing is an IT architecture that brings the actual processing power and data storage physically closer to the data source.
To the edge of the network.
Right, rather than sending it all the way back to a centralized cloud server.
So the truck itself becomes the data center.
For critical real-time decisions, yes. The truck processes the braking algorithm locally at the edge in milliseconds. Then later, when it's parked, it might upload the aggregated summary data to the central cloud for long-term storage and training.
Which drastically reduces lag time. But from a business perspective, it also massively slashes bandwidth costs, right? Because you aren't constantly transmitting terabytes of raw video over expensive cellular networks.
Spot on. It solves the speed and bandwidth problems. But what about the complexity problem?
Right. Processing all that data locally requires serious hardware. And the textbook introduces this concept called Neuromorphic Computing. I have to admit, when I read that, it sounded like biology, not MIS.
Well, it bridges the two, actually. It sounds biological because it's directly inspired by the structure and function of the human brain.
How so?
Traditional computers use the von Neumann architecture, where the processor and the memory are in two different physical locations on the motherboard.
Okay, so the computer has to constantly shuttle data back and forth between the CPU and the RAM.
Exactly. Which creates a bottleneck and consumes a massive amount of energy. But the human brain doesn't separate processing and memory. We have billions of neurons connected by trillions of synapses. A synapse acts as both the processor and the memory storage simultaneously.
Oh, wow.
So neuromorphic computing involves creating physical computer chips that mimic this exact biological neural network. They use artificial silicon neurons and synapses.
So instead of moving data back and forth, the computation happens in a massively parallel interconnected web, just like our thoughts.
Exactly. And because they process information in parallel and only activate when there's a change in data, just like human neurons firing, they're incredibly energy efficient.
So they're fundamentally designed to be adaptive.
Yes, capable of learning on the fly, which makes them exponentially better at handling highly complex, noisy tasks like visual pattern recognition, sensory processing, and real-time robotics.
We are literally building hardware that physically thinks more like a human, operating at lightning speed on the edge of the network. That is wild.
It really is.
But here's where this gets intensely relevant for the business students listening. What if you're a marketing director or a supply chain analyst and you don't have a computer science degree? Can you actually leverage any of this power yourself? The textbook highlights low-code and no-code programming. Walk me through this.
This is a seismic shift in how businesses operate. Historically, if a business unit needed a new software tool, they had to submit a request to the IT department.
And wait months.
Right, where professional engineers would spend months writing traditional hand-coded lines of Python, Java, or C++ OS. Low-code and no-code programming is a development approach that minimizes or entirely eliminates the need for that traditional hand coding.
So if I'm not typing out lines of syntax, how am I building the software?
You're using highly intuitive visual interfaces. It's entirely drag-and-drop elements, visual flowcharts, and pre-built operational templates.
So no code means anyone can do it.
Exactly. It allows everyday business users to define a complex workflow, integrate databases, and create functional apps without writing a single line of code. Low code might require a tiny bit of basic logic like writing an Excel formula, but it's highly accessible to non-technical staff.
What does this actually mean for a business manager, though? It sounds like it just cuts out the middleman.
It democratizes application creation. It creates what the industry calls citizen developable.
Citizen developers, I like that.
Yeah, so if a regional manager needs a rapid prototype for a customer onboarding app, or an HR analyst wants an automated workflow for employee training, they don't have to wait 6 months for IT to build it. They can log into a platform and build a functional, secure app themselves over a weekend.
I can see the massive efficiency gains there. But let me push back a bit. If anyone in marketing can just drag and drop an app into existence, what happens to traditional software developers? Do they become obsolete?
Not at all.
And doesn't this create a nightmare for the IT department trying to manage hundreds of rogue apps built by amateurs?
Those are two distinct, highly critical points. First, traditional developers absolutely do not become obsolete. In fact, their value increases.
Really? Oh.
By offloading the routine, repetitive app building to business users, professional developers are freed up to tackle the truly hard, revenue-generating problems. They're the ones engineering the complex machine learning models, optimizing the neuromorphic chips, and crucially, building the very platforms that allow for low-code development.
Ah, so they're building the sandbox that the citizen developers play in.
Exactly. And to your second point about the IT nightmare, which is often called shadow IT, that is where robust governance comes in. The beauty of enterprise low-code platforms is that they operate within a secure, IT-approved environment.
So IT sets the rules.
The IT department sets the guardrails. They ensure the data is encrypted and compliant with company policy, while giving the business user the freedom to design the interface and workflow.
Speaking of security and guardrails, keeping these complex edge-computed networks safe from cyber attacks seems virtually impossible with traditional firewalls. The text mentions a fascinating defense mechanism called a digital immune system, or DIS.
Yes, a digital immune system conceptually mimics how the biological human immune system defends the body against novel viruses.
Okay, I like this analogy.
Right, so for decades, cybersecurity was based on a perimeter defense model, building a massive static digital wall around the company's servers. But in an era of IoT devices, remote work, and edge computing, that perimeter has completely dissolved.
Because everyone is accessing data from everywhere.
Exactly. So a DIS shifts from a static wall to an active, continuous learning defense mechanism.
How does a digital network actually learn to fight a virus it's never seen before, though?
Traditional antivirus software looks for known signatures, essentially a fingerprint of a known piece of malware. But if a hacker writes a brand new virus, the system doesn't recognize it.
Right.
A digital immune system uses advanced heuristics, cutting-edge machine learning algorithms, and behavioral analytics. It doesn't just look for bad files, it watches how the network normally behaves.
So it establishes a baseline.
Exactly. If an HR employee's account suddenly starts trying to download 3 terabytes of highly classified engineering schematics at 3 a.m., the DIS recognizes that anomaly immediately.
And what does it do? Does it just send an alert to a human IT guy who might be asleep?
No, and that's the key difference. It acts autonomously. It adapts to the threat in real time. It can instantly isolate that specific HR account, automatically sever the connection to the engineering database, and even launch active software countermeasures to quarantine the infected device.
All before the malware can spread laterally.
Uh-huh.
That's amazing. It's actively fighting back, just like white blood cells isolating an infection.
Exactly.
That is a brilliant way to conceptualize modern cybersecurity. Now, before we move on to how all this tech impacts the medical field, the textbook drops some absolute wildcard horizon technologies. These are the R&D bets that will define the 2030s. I want to spend some time on these because they are mind-bending. First up, quantum computers.
This is perhaps the most disruptive technology on the horizon. To understand it, you have to realize that traditional computers, even the most powerful supercomputers today, still fundamentally process information using bits.
Right, the aisles and ones.
Exactly. A bit is a binary switch. It represents either a 0 or a 1. Every email, every photo, every algorithm is just billions of zeros and ones processed in sequence. Quantum computers abandon that model entirely.
Okay.
They operate at the subatomic level, using atoms and molecules to create something called a quantum bit, or qubit.
And the textbook says a qubit can be both a 0 and a 1 at the same time. I'm going to be honest, physically, how is that possible? My brain hurts just trying to visualize an object that's in 2 opposing states simultaneously.
It is deeply counterintuitive because it relies on quantum mechanics. The state of being both a 0 and a 1 simultaneously is called superposition.
Superposition, okay.
The best analogy is a coin. A standard computer bit is a coin sitting flat on a table. It is definitively either heads, which is 1, or tails, which is 0. A qubit is a coin that is spinning rapidly on its edge.
Oh, I see.
While it's spinning, it's a blur. It is essentially both heads and tails at the exact same time. It only resolves into a definitive 1 or 0 when you force it to stop and measure it.
Okay, the spinning coin analogy really helps. But why does a spinning coin make a computer faster? What's the actual business application here?
Imagine you're managing logistics for a massive shipping company, and you need to find the absolute most efficient delivery route out of millions of possible combinations. A traditional computer, using standard bits, has to calculate path A, then path B, then path C, one by one.
It does it very fast, but it's sequential.
Right. A quantum computer, because its qubits exist in all those overlapping states at once, can theoretically calculate every single possible path simultaneously in a single operation.
Wow. So it doesn't just do the math faster, it does all the math at the exact same moment.
Correct. And it gets even weirder because qubits can affect other qubits over distances through a phenomenon called quantum entanglement.
It just keeps getting more sci-fi.
It does. But the end result is processing power that is exponential, not incrementally, but exponentially faster than anything we possess today. It will revolutionize cryptography, materials science, and incredibly complex financial modeling.
That is a true paradigm shift. Let's look at the next wildcard the text brings up, putting a 4G mobile network on the moon. You mentioned this in the intro. Why on Earth, or off Earth rather, are we doing this?
It's a joint initiative between NASA and Nokia. The goal is to deploy an operational 4G communications network on the lunar surface, with the ultimate objective of supporting an Artemis lunar base that can sustain a permanent human presence by 2028.
But why 4G? We're rolling out 5G and talking about 6G down here on Earth. Why send older technology to the moon?
It comes down to reliability and the physical environment. 4G provides highly stable, reliable long-distance communication. More importantly, terrestrial equipment has to deal with massive interference, buildings, trees, rain, other radio signals.
And the moon has none of that.
Right. The moon has virtually zero physical or atmospheric interference. A hardened 4G signal can travel vast distances unimpeded between lunar rovers, habitats, and astronauts.
So they just have to engineer it for the extreme environment.
Exactly. They have to rigorously engineer the hardware to withstand extreme temperature swings and cosmic radiation, but the actual signal transmission is pristine. They do plan to upgrade to 5G eventually, but 4G is the proven, reliable foundation for the emerging space tech economy.
The idea of a space tech economy is just wild. It implies there's an actual business model for lunar infrastructure. Moving from macro space networks down to the micro level, the text discusses wearable AIs.
A prime example highlighted in the text is Humane's AI Pin. We're moving away from the paradigm of staring down at a glowing rectangle in our hands.
The smartphone.
Right. Imagine a small, sleek device pinned magnetically to your clothing that effectively replaces your smartphone. It has no traditional screen. It's entirely voice-operated, utilizing advanced natural language processing.
If it doesn't have a screen, how do you interact with visual information?
It features a tiny laser ink projector that can beam a rudimentary display onto the palm of your hand if you need to see a menu or something. But mostly, it relies on ambient computing.
What does that look like in practice?
It can open apps, place calls, compose highly contextual text messages, and even translate spoken languages in real time during a conversation. It also features a camera. So if you hold a piece of food or a product in front of it, its computer vision algorithms can analyze the object and provide nutritional info or price comparisons via audio.
So the interface completely disappears, and the AI just lives invisibly in our environment. That brings us to another invisible technology: Reconfigurable Intelligent Surfaces, or RIS.
This is a fascinating solution to a major infrastructure problem. Currently, if a large building, a dense urban environment, or a mountain blocks cellular radio waves, telecom companies have to spend millions to build another cell tower.
Or install those active signal boosters that consume a lot of electricity.
Right, to fix the dreaded dead zone in the middle of a concrete building. RIS solves this passively. It uses metamaterials.
Metamaterials.
These are materials engineered from specific combinations of metals and plastics to create tiny, microscopic repeating patterns on their surface. These patterns are specifically engineered to interact with electromagnetic waves.
Oh, interesting.
An RIS panel can actually absorb, reflect, precisely adjust the angle, or passively amplify radio waves.
So it's essentially a highly engineered smart mirror for cellular signals.
Precisely. If you place these panels strategically on the sides of buildings or inside office hallways, they can bend the signal around corners and eliminate radio dead zones entirely.
That's brilliant.
And this tech will be absolutely critical and could remove the need for thousands of massive new cell towers when telecom networks transition from 5G to the higher frequency, shorter range waves of 6G networks.
And finally, in this tech rapid fire, the textbook mentions using light for data storage.
Yes. Researchers have developed a prototype computer chip built on an unfathomably small nanoscale that utilizes light and advanced image capturing hardware to process and store data.
Why use light instead of electricity?
The significance here is that it has enough integrated capacity to run complex AI models completely locally without relying on internet connectivity or cloud servers. The goal is to build a chip that learns visually and instantly, much like the human brain's optical processing centers.
Which ties right back into edge computing and neuromorphic design. And if you add all of this to the development of exascale computers, which the text notes are supercomputers with hardware so incredibly powerful they can process billions of calculations per second.
Often utilizing advanced GPUs to support their massive parallel architecture.
Right. The sheer volume of processing power coming online in the next 5 years is difficult to overstate. It's almost overwhelming when you stack it all up.
It is a lot to take in.
But if we connect this foundational tech back to the bigger picture, all this raw computing power, the quantum models, the edge computing, the neuromorphic efficiency, is just the engine. It's just the foundation.
Right.
Let's look at how that engine is being practically applied to the most complex vital system on Earth, the human body. Let's dive into body section 3. Healthcare.
It's the perfect application. Healthcare administration is a massive, multi-trillion-dollar sector of global business, and its operational foundation is being entirely reshaped by the intersection of big data, machine learning, and electronic health records, or EHRs.
Now, EHRs have been around for a while, right? I feel like my doctor's been typing into a tablet instead of a paper chart for a decade.
Yes, the digitization of charts isn't new. EHRs provide a standardized system for medical professionals to input, store, and retrieve patient data securely on the cloud. But what is revolutionary today is how big data analytics is being applied across millions of those records simultaneously.
So they're analyzing the whole population's data at once.
Exactly. Machine learning models aren't just storing the data, they're mining it for predictive analytics.
What exactly are they predicting, though?
Hospital operations and public health trends. By analyzing vast data sets of patient admissions, seasonal trends, and local demographic health data, predictive algorithms can forecast regional disease outbreaks before they happen. And for hospital administrators, they use this data to accurately predict peak hospital occupancy times down to the hour, or anticipate a specific patient's readmission risk based on their unique recovery profile.
From a management perspective, that is huge. You can optimize your staffing, ensure you have enough beds, and drastically reduce operational waste.
Absolutely.
But wait, I have a major red flag here. If all of this deeply personal patient data is being fed into massive machine learning algorithms to predict macro trends, what about patient privacy?
It's the biggest concern.
Right, because in the U.S., HIPAA laws are incredibly strict, and the fines for data breaches are astronomical. How does a hospital feed patient data to an AI without violating IP?
That is the absolute critical challenge for healthcare IT. You need the data to train the AI, but you cannot expose the patient. And the textbook introduces a fascinating, highly complex machine learning technique used to solve this exact problem. GANs.
GANs.
Generative Adversarial Networks.
Generative Adversarial Networks. That sounds aggressive. Break down the mechanics of that for me. How does it protect privacy?
It is an ingenious software architecture. A GAN essentially uses two competing neural networks that are locked in a continuous battle with each other. A generator and a discriminator.
Okay, let's look at the first one, the generator.
The generator takes the original, highly sensitive set of real patient data. Its job is to scramble, anonymize, and synthesize that data to create a totally new, completely fake data set.
But it still has to be useful for the AI, right?
Exactly. This fake data set must possess the exact same underlying statistical properties and mathematical distributions as the real, confidential data.
Okay, so the generator is effectively creating incredibly realistic fake patient profiles. What's the role of the discriminator?
The discriminator acts as a detective. It analyzes the fake data produced by the generator and tries to determine if it's real or generated. The two networks compete against each other in a closed loop.
I see where this is going.
The generator constantly adjusts and refines its fake data based on the discriminator's feedback, trying to trick the discriminator. It keeps iterating millions of times until the generator becomes so exceptionally good at its job that the discriminator can no longer tell the difference between the generated synthetic data and the original real patient data.
So it's exactly like an elite art forger and a forensic art detective going back and forth. The forger paints a fake, the detective points out the flaws. The forger tries again, getting better every time, until the forgery is completely undetectable by the expert.
That is a flawless analogy, and the business result of that adversarial process is profound. Hospitals are left with a highly useful, statistically accurate synthetic data set that they can safely feed into predictive analytics models or share with external researchers.
Without ever risking the exposure of a real patient's actual identity. The privacy liability is essentially neutralized while the data utility is preserved. That is an incredible use of AI to solve an AI-created problem.
It really is elegant.
But what about giving the actual patients control over their own unanonymized records? Because right now, if I switch doctors, getting my records transferred is a bureaucratic nightmare. The text mentions blockchain as a solution.
Currently, medical records are stored in siloed, centralized databases owned by individual hospital networks, which makes it incredibly hard for patients to access or port their own information. By utilizing blockchain technology, those records could be stored on a distributed ledger.
Walk me through the mechanics of a distributed ledger in a healthcare context.
Instead of a single hospital server holding the only copy of your file, the encrypted database is distributed across multiple independent servers or nodes on the cloud. Every time a new entry is made, a new prescription, a test result, it must be verified by the network and added as a new block to the chain.
So it's super secure.
Highly secure, because a hacker would have to simultaneously compromise the majority of the independent nodes to alter the data, which is computationally nearly impossible. Furthermore, because a blockchain is immutable, meaning past entries cannot be altered or deleted, it creates a perfect, tamper-proof audit trail of a patient's lifelong medical history.
And patients control it.
Yes. Using cryptographic keys, patients could securely control who accesses their encrypted data and seamlessly grant permission to new specialists.
And to make sure all these different hospital system specialists and blockchain networks can actually talk to each other and understand the data, the text mentions an interoperability standard called the HL7 FHIR initiative.
Yes. Data is useless if the receiving computer cannot parse the format. HL7 is a nonprofit organization that develops international standards for electronic health information. Their latest, most critical set of protocols is called Fast Healthcare Interoperability Resources, or FHIR. It's basically the universal translator for medical IT. It ensures that an application developed for a massive hospital system in New York can seamlessly ingest and read the data from a tiny rural clinic in Texas. Over 90% of U.S. healthcare providers currently utilize these protocols, which is vital for the data liquidity required by modern AI.
So the underlying data infrastructure is secure, standardized, and flowing. Let's talk about the front lines, actually diagnosing patients. The text highlights symptom checker chatbots, or SCCs.
SCCs are moving beyond just listing symptoms on a website. These chatbots utilize natural language processing, or NLP, to have a dynamic, conversational diagnostic session with a patient via text or voice.
So you just talk to it like a doctor.
Basically, based on the patient's plain language answers, the AI dynamically adjusts its follow-up questions, mimicking a doctor's differential diagnosis process. They can effectively help triage patients before they ever enter a waiting room, advising them whether they need an ER, an urgent care, or just bed rest.
That saves so much time.
And another compelling example in this space is Wobot Health, which uses similar conversational AI to provide accessible, cognitive, behavioral therapeutic support for mental health in a conversational manner.
But AI isn't just talking to patients. It's actively discovering the medicine they take. This was a specific fact from the textbook that absolutely blew my mind, and I want you to expand on it. Scientists are utilizing AI to explore all known atoms in the solar system to discover new, drug-like molecules. How is a computer discovering drugs?
It is truly staggering, and it completely disrupts the traditional pharmaceutical business model, which relies on decades of expensive trial and error. Think about how a drug works. It's essentially a molecular key fitting into a molecular lock on a cell to trigger a reaction.
Right, biochemistry is basically physical geometry at a microscopic scale.
Exactly. Historically, chemists had to synthesize compounds in a lab and physically test them to see if the key fit. Now, machine learning software can digitally map the target cellular lock and then mathematically explore massive databases of every known chemical compound and atomic structure to simulate which ones might fit.
Running simulations instead of lab tests.
Right. The AI can run millions of virtual chemical reactions in seconds, identifying highly viable compounds that human researchers will literally never have the time or cognitive ability to conceptualize on their own. It vastly accelerates the discovery pipeline and slashes the R&D costs associated with bringing a new drug to market.
And once the AI finds a promising molecule, we have new ways to test those drugs without immediately needing expensive, highly regulated human or animal trials.
Right. Using an innovation called an organ-on-a-chip, or OOC. This is a microfluidic device, roughly the size of a USB drive, lined with living human cells.
A USB drive with living cells.
Yes. It physically and chemically mimics the dynamic mechanical functions and physiochemical reactions of an actual human organ, like a lung or a heart. Researchers can introduce the AI-discovered drug to the chip and observe the exact cellular response in real time. It offers incredibly accurate biological results, cutting clinical study time and ethical complications drastically.
Let's move from pharmaceutical interventions to physical interventions. The textbook dives into medical robotics.
The hardware here is advancing as rapidly as the software. A prime example highlighted in the text involves engineers at MIT who are utilizing advanced 3D printing to create custom robotic hearts.
Custom printing a heart. How does that work?
The process starts by taking a detailed medical scan of a specific patient's heart. They use that scan to generate a precise 3D computer model. Then they 3D print the model, but not out of hard plastic. They use specialized, proprietary polymer-based inks.
Because it needs to stretch.
Exactly. Once these polymer inks cure, they form a soft, incredibly flexible shell that is the exact structural shape of the patient's unique heart.
And because it's flexible, they can make it pump.
Yes. They wrap the shell in pneumatic sleeves that can inflate and deflate rhythmically. It accurately replicates the exact stretching and squeezing motions of the patient's natural heartbeat. This allows surgeons to physically practice complex valve replacements on a perfect replica before touching the actual patient.
That is beautiful, highly practical, and honestly slightly terrifying. What about actual robots doing the doctor's job on a living patient?
We're seeing the rise of robotic checkups. Human doctors can use advanced medical robotic systems to perform routine physical examinations on infectious patients without direct physical interaction, drastically reducing the transmission of pathogens.
Which is huge for pandemic response.
Absolutely. And this tech could also massively increase the availability of specialist healthcare in rural or underserved areas. Furthermore, the text notes that surgeons in China are beginning to utilize advanced telemedicine over ultra-low latency 5G networks to perform actual delicate surgical procedures remotely, operating robotic arms from hundreds of miles away.
But the text notes, this raises a lot of management and ethical concerns about the loss of personalized care and the liability if the network drops during surgery.
Exactly. The network stability is a life or death issue there.
And speaking of incredible interventions, the text takes us all the way down to the microscopic level.
Yes, the frontier of nanorobots. These are functional machines built at the nanometer scale, which is 1/1000th of a meter. They are essentially microscopic delivery vehicles.
Navigating the bloodstream.
Right. They have the capacity to navigate through the human bloodstream to carry highly toxic chemotherapy medication directly to a specific cancer tumor, leaving the surrounding healthy tissue completely unharmed.
That's incredible.
The long-term theoretical application involves deploying swarms of nanobots to detect early-stage diseases or even perform physical repairs on damaged cells from the inside out.
Or rather than repairing the cell, we just change the body's blueprint entirely with gene editing.
The text focuses specifically on CRISPR, which stands for Clustered, Regularly Interspaced, Short Palindromic Repeats.
Try saying that 3 times fast.
It's a mouthful, but it's a technology adapted from a natural defense mechanism found in bacteria's immune systems. CRISPR acts like a pair of highly precise molecular scissors. It allows biosciences researchers to find a specific sequence of DNA within a cell and edit, remove, or replace individual genetic mutations.
So they can literally rewrite the code of life.
Yes. Medical startups are actively using this to modify genes with the profound hope of permanently curing genetic diseases like HIV, various aggressive cancers, and Huntington's disease.
Okay, we have covered some massive paradigm-shifting leaps forward in medical tech. But in the middle of reading all of this, I had a real aha moment regarding virtual reality for pain relief.
Oh, yes.
The textbook discusses using immersive VR headsets to distract patients undergoing painful procedures. But here's the kicker. What does this all mean for the bottom line? The textbook explicitly notes that in subsequent studies, researchers found that patients using VR did not perceive a significant difference in pain intensity or blood pressure compared to patients using traditional low-tech distraction methods.
That is a highly critical observation, and it grounds this entire discussion.
Right. It's a great, sobering reminder to you, the business student or operations manager listening right now. Not every shiny, heavily marketed piece of emerging tech is an immediate magic bullet.
No, it's not.
It's easy to get caught up in the hype of VR or blockchain or AI, but as a manager, you always need to rigorously test the return on investment and the actual measurable operational efficacy before you commit millions of dollars to implement it across your organization.
A vital point. Hype does not inherently equal operational reality. Technology must solve a tangible problem better than the existing methods, or it is just a very expensive distraction.
Exactly. So we've deeply covered the mechanics of future commerce, the raw engine of computing power, and the massive shifts in healthcare. For final section, let's zoom out to the macro picture. Let's look at body section 4, society, environment, and robotics.
Let's do it.
We need to examine how these technologies interact with our social structures and the physical planet. Let's start with society. You mentioned earlier how the Internet of Behaviors and predictive analytics create massive privacy liabilities for businesses. How is society and regulatory infrastructure pushing back against this data hunger?
The tension between data utility and individual privacy is arguably the defining conflict of the digital age. One of the most elegant solutions highlighted in the text is a statistical technique called differential privacy.
Okay.
And this isn't just a theory. Massive entities like the U.S. Census Bureau, Apple, and Facebook are actively deploying this to collect critical aggregate data from their users without technically identifying any individual user.
Walk me through the mechanics of that. If Apple is collecting data on what apps I use, how do they know it's me but also not know it's me?
They do it by deliberately injecting mathematical noise into the data set at the point of collection. Think of it like this. If an HR department wants to know what percentage of employees have broken a company rule, but they know people will lie if asked directly, they use a noise mechanism.
Like a survey trick.
Right. They tell the employee to flip a coin in secret. If it's heads, answer the question honestly. If it's tails, flip again. If the second flip is heads, say yes. If tails, say no, regardless of the truth.
Okay, so the individual answer is obscured. The HR department doesn't know if your yes is because you broke the rule or because of the coin flip.
Exactly. The individual's privacy is mathematically protected by that randomized noise. But because the HR department knows the statistical probability of the coin flips, they can mathematically subtract that expected noise from the total aggregate results to find the true overall percentage of the entire group.
That's incredibly smart.
Differential privacy algorithms do this digitally on a massive scale. It's a highly delicate balance. If a business injects the precise right amount of noise, the aggregate data, the macro consumer trends they need to plan inventory, remains highly accurate and useful.
But the individual identities hidden within that data are mathematically obscured, shielding the company from liability. What happens if they add too much noise to be safe, though?
If they add too much noise, the data becomes statistically meaningless and completely unusable for predictive analytics. But when balanced correctly, differential privacy allows a business to satisfy its hunger for actionable consumer data while rigorously complying with rising regulatory demands and societal expectations for privacy.
That is a brilliant solution to a tough management problem. But not all data applications are universally embraced. The text also mentions predictive policing. Honestly, this immediately sounds like the dystopian movie Minority Report, where people are arrested before they commit a crime. What's the actual reality of this tech?
It's a highly controversial application of the same machine learning we discussed in healthcare, applied to civic administration. Predictive policing utilizes advanced information technology, geographic information systems, and evidence-based intervention models.
Okay.
It ingests massive historical data sets of past crimes analyzing times, specific locations, weather patterns, and crime types to identify subtle operational patterns.
So it's not predicting who will commit a crime, but where it might happen.
Precisely. It helps law enforcement command staff predict geographic zones and specific timeframes where criminal activity is statistically most likely to occur. From an operations standpoint, this allows police departments to allocate their limited patrol resources and personnel much more effectively, acting as a deterrent.
Obviously, this is a highly charged topic when it comes to the quality of the data.
Huh.
If the historical data itself contains human biases regarding where police patrolled in the past,
The algorithm will just amplify those biases.
but sticking strictly to the mechanics outlined in the text, the core technology is purely about advanced data pattern recognition. Let's look at another field completely disrupted by pattern recognition, the arts. Are creative industries safe from automation?
Not at all. Historically, classical composers intuitively used mathematical structures, rhythm, scale, counterpoint, to create music. Now, AI is mastering those underlying mathematics to compose completely original, royalty-free compositions on demand.
AI composers.
Yeah, machine learning algorithms like Ampere, Baidu's AI Composer, and Google's Magenta have been trained on vast libraries of human music. They can actively generate highly complex, emotionally resonant music in any genre.
If I'm a marketing director producing a massive ad campaign, I don't need to pay a human composer thousands of dollars in licensing fees. I can just tell an AI to generate a triumphant, upbeat orchestral track for free.
Exactly.
That raises massive industry-altering questions about copyright law, intellectual property, and the future viability of creative professionals.
It absolutely does. The definition of intellectual property is fundamentally challenged when a machine generates the asset.
We're also seeing new ways to analyze the physical world around us, down to the molecular level. The textbook details an incredibly specific example, using tech to analyze whiskey aromas.
Yes, this highlights how advanced sensors are impacting the food and beverage industry. Scientists are using an incredibly complex analytical technology called comprehensive two-dimensional gas chromatography paired with time-of-flight mass spectrometry.
Try saying that 5 times fast. What does that actually mean for the distillery?
It means they are no longer relying solely on a master distiller's nose. This technology allows scientists to meticulously separate and identify the exact microscopic combinations of volatile compounds that give a specific batch of whiskey its unique aroma and taste profile.
So they map the flavor molecule by molecule.
Right. It allows a business to ensure perfect product consistency across millions of bottles or to reverse engineer a competitor's flavor profile.
Quality assurance through molecular mapping. Incredible. What about how we fundamentally interface with all these computers? We talked about voice activation with the AI pin, but the text goes much further into the realm of thought.
It discusses the frontier of brain-computer interfaces, or BCIs. The text highlights a specific research project originating from Facebook's Building 8 hardware division. The ultimate goal is a frictionless interface that allows users to communicate with the computer system using only their thoughts.
How is that mechanically achieved without drilling into someone's skull.
They're aiming to use advanced, non-invasive optical imaging technology. The hardware would shine harmless light through the skull to scan a user's cerebral cortex up to 100 times per second.
Okay, scanning blood flow.
Exactly. By detecting the subtle changes in blood flow and neural activity, the AI attempts to decipher what specific words the user is internally verbalizing and translate those silent thoughts directly into text on a screen.
Literally reading our minds to compose an email. These technologies, BCIs, Moon4G, quantum, they're all categorized under what the text calls X-Tech.
Right. X-Tech is a broad structural umbrella term used by analysts to describe emerging horizon technologies that are highly likely to have a substantial disruptive impact on future innovation and market dynamics.
The X is just a variable.
Yeah, the X serves as a placeholder for various interdisciplinary fields. Fintech for finance, biotech for healthcare, space tech, agritech. It encompasses concepts that are theoretically proven or in early prototype phases, but haven't reached their full commercial potential yet.
Like high-altitude platform stations, or APS. The text brings these up as an alternative to the RIS panels we discussed earlier.
Exactly. While RIS bounces signals around buildings, APS takes the signal above the buildings entirely. High-altitude platform stations take the form of advanced unmanned blimps, massive tethered airships, or lightweight solar-powered drones operating continuously in the stratosphere, miles above commercial airspace.
What's the business use case for a stratospheric blimp?
As global commerce moves towards 6G and requires massive IoT connectivity for autonomous supply chains, HPS can serve as highly efficient, easily deployable cellular service platforms. They can cover vast geographic areas, including oceans and deserts.
Which saves telecom companies a fortune.
Right, entirely saving them the massive capital expenditure of securing land and building ground-based cell towers. They are also vital for high-resolution environmental monitoring.
Speaking of the environment, let's pivot to one of the most pressing management issues of our time, the carbon challenge and energy storage. For any business student listening, you need to understand that ESG, environmental, social, and governance goals, are no longer just a PR exercise.
No, mandatory.
They're a massive, heavily scrutinized part of corporate strategy and compliance today. Understanding how technology solves these environmental shifts is absolutely vital for businesses forecasting their future energy costs and regulatory liabilities.
The textbook goes into significant detail on 3 major distinct carbon capture technologies designed to mitigate corporate emissions. The first is ionic liquids, or ILS, carbon capture.
What exactly is an ionic liquid?
It's essentially a highly specialized, non-volatile salt that uniquely exists in a liquid state at room temperature. In industrial smokestacks, these liquids can be used to scrub CO2 from the exhaust.
And they work better than older methods.
They are vastly superior because they absorb far more CO2 per volume than traditional amine-based chemical scrubbers. Furthermore, because they don't evaporate, they are much easier and safer to store without leaking toxic fumes, and they require significantly less energy to produce and recycle, drastically lowering the operating expense for a manufacturing plant.
How does that stack approach compare to DESC?
DESC stands for direct air capture. While ILS captures carbon at the source of emission, DESC involves pulling vast amounts of ambient atmospheric air through a massive standalone filtration facility.
Basically giant fans.
Right. These facilities use arrays of giant fans and those traditional amine-based scrubbers to chemically remove CO2 directly from the open air.
From a physics standpoint, that seems incredibly inefficient. The concentration of CO2 in the open air is only about 420 parts per million. You have to move millions of tons of air just to get a tiny bit of carbon, which requires a massive amount of electricity to run the fans. That sounds like a terrible ROI for a business.
It is currently highly energy intensive and expensive, which is why the third option the textbook presents is so compelling, pulling carbon directly from the ocean.
Why is the ocean a better target than the air?
It comes down to basic chemical density. The oceans naturally absorb carbon from the atmosphere. The concentration of CO2 dissolved in seawater is roughly 100 times denser than the CO2 in the ambient air.
Oh, wow. I had no idea.
Therefore, an ocean capture facility has to process a significantly smaller volume of water to extract the exact same tonnage of CO2 compared to a DEG facility scrubbing the air. It's a much more efficient mechanical process.
And once a company captures all this carbon using any of these methods, what do they actually do with it? You can't just leave it in a tank. The text mentions a technology called photocatalysts that can turn waste CO2 into profitable materials.
This is the holy grail of carbon management, turning a liability into an asset. Photocatalysts are a specific type of advanced semiconductor material.
Okay.
When they are exposed to highly concentrated, high-energy ultraviolet light, they generate highly reactive electrons. Researchers have engineered these catalysts to use those electrons to actually attack and break the incredibly strong, highly resistant double bond between the carbon and oxygen atoms in a carbon dioxide molecule.
They're molecularly dismantling the greenhouse gas. And then what?
Once the bond is broken, they can recombine the carbon with other elements to synthesize highly usable, valuable commercial materials like synthetic aviation fuels, specialized plastics, or carbon-cured concrete. It creates a closed-loop carbon economy.
We also see a massive push to eliminate carbon in transportation entirely. The text highlights the Airbus Zero-Emission Concept Aircraft Initiative, which is exploring hydrogen propulsion across various designs, including traditional turbofans, turboprops for regional flights, and radical blended-wing body designs that maximize aerodynamic efficiency.
That's going to transform aviation.
But bringing it back to the ground, for a business running a massive, power-hungry AI data center, energy storage and reliable generation are the absolute keys to profitability.
Let's address energy storage first. Renewable energy like solar and wind is intermittent. The sun doesn't always shine. We need to store that energy. But giant lithium-ion batteries are expensive and degrade. The text highlights thermal energy storage, or TES, as an industrial-scale alternative.
How does thermal energy storage work? It doesn't use batteries.
No, it uses physics and basic materials. A TES facility employs excess renewable solar power generated during the day to massively heat a physical storage medium. For example, they can use electric heaters to circulate fluid through massive insulated silos of concrete blocks, heating the concrete up to 2,200 degrees Fahrenheit.
Heating up rocks, essentially.
Exactly. Concrete has immense thermal mass. It retains that intense thermal energy for days. Then, when the grid needs power at night, they reverse the process. They run water past the superheated concrete, producing high-pressure steam, which then drives a standard electrical turbine to generate electricity on demand. It's low-tech materials paired with high-tech management.
And for actual baseload power generation that doesn't rely on the sun, we have small modular reactors, or SMRs. The text positions these as a massive shift in energy infrastructure.
SMRs represent a highly promising zero-carbon alternative to traditional natural gas or coal power plants. They're advanced, miniaturized nuclear fission reactors. The critical difference is in the name, modular.
Right. Traditional nuclear plants take a decade to build.
And are plagued by cost overruns. SMRs are small enough that they can be entirely prefabricated on an assembly line in a factory, loaded onto a standard flatbed truck, and shipped directly to a corporate site or a municipal grid.
That fundamentally changes the financial risk model. If you standardize the design in a factory, the regulatory licensing process is greatly simplified. A business running a massive edge computing network can start with one module that produces about 300 megawatts of electricity.
And if they need to scale up their operations 5 years later, they don't have to build a new plant. They just buy a second module and plug it in next to the first one.
Precisely. It brings economies of scale to nuclear power generation, providing incredibly stable, clean baseload power. And for environments near the coast, the text introduces another fascinating renewable generation method, osmotic power.
Osmotic power, that relates to osmosis, right?
Yes, it harnesses the kinetic motion of molecules caused by a strict difference in salinity or saltiness between two bodies of water to create clean electricity.
How do they set that up?
The text points to a prototype power plant in Japan as an example. They take the highly saline, concentrated saltwater brine left over from a municipal desalination plant and place it on one side of a specialized semi-permeable membrane. On the other side of the membrane, they have regular fresh water.
And nature abhors an imbalance.
Exactly. The laws of physics dictate that the fresh water will naturally and forcefully flow through the membrane toward the saltwater side to try and equalize the salinity. This massive influx of water vastly increases the hydraulic pressure on the saltwater side.
Which they use to generate power.
Right. That immense pressure is routed to make a mechanical plunger rise, which spins a generator, creating a steady stream of electricity simply from mixing salt and fresh water.
Science is truly amazing when applied to industrial problems.
It really is. Also, as a quick side note on environmental tech, the text mentions elastocalorics for commercial cooling. As global temperatures rise, air conditioning is becoming a massive energy drain.
What's the elastocaloric approach?
It involves highly specialized metal alloys that physically absorb heat from the air when they are mechanically bent and release that heat when they are stretched back out. It uses far less electricity than traditional vapor compression systems and completely avoids using environmentally harmful hydrofluorocarbon refrigerants, though the mechanical systems are currently a bit bulky for home use.
It's a phenomenal example of how emerging tech is looking beyond traditional chemistry to find entirely new physical, mechanical processes to solve old environmental and operational bottlenecks.
Okay, for our final topic, we are bringing it out of the power plant and back into our daily lives and offices. Let's examine robotics specifically designed for human interaction. We mentioned robots in heavy manufacturing and microscopic medicine, but these are robots designed to walk among us in commercial spaces.
This is where operations meet human psychology. Let's look at Moxie, developed by Diligent Robotics. Moxie is an autonomous, mobile, robotic nursing assistant equipped with a robotic arm. Since its widespread deployment starting around 2020, fleets of Moxie robots have successfully handled over 1 million hospital deliveries of non-patient items, things like lab samples, medications, and clean linens.
Taking the grunt work away from the nursing staff.
Exactly. They average 20 to 26 minutes per delivery task, operating 24/7. By taking over these routine logistical chores, Moxie robots have saved highly trained clinical staff over 575,000 man-hours. That is a massive operational savings for a hospital network.
But the truly interesting part is how humans actually react to it on the floor. You would think nurses and patients would find a robot wandering the halls unnerving.
The opposite is true, actually. Patients and staff have shown incredibly strong, positive psychological engagement. Patients actively ask for selfies and try to verbally interact with Moxie as it passes.
That's so funny.
And because of this strong desire for connection, hospitals and the developers are actually programming Moxie with social, interaction-focused behaviors, like pausing to acknowledge a greeting or displaying friendly, emotive digital eyes. The robot is actively seen and treated as a valued team member, not just a rolling cart.
That acceptance opens the door for robots in other intimate spaces like our homes. The text details NEO, a commercial housekeeping robot. This isn't a little disc vacuum, it's a humanoid. It's 5'6" tall, weighs 154 pounds, and crucially, it has a soft cloth, sweater-like exterior to make it approachable, and currently retails for around $20,000.
And it does chores.
It performs household chores autonomously, though a human remote pilot usually has to take control and show it how to do a specific task the first time to train its neural network. The text also notes Unitree's G1 humanoid robot, which rapidly learns industrial or household tasks simply by observing and following the physical motions of a human wearing a motion capture bodysuit.
And finally, we have robots entering direct conversational customer service. The text highlights Area, developed by a company called Robotics. Area is a highly advanced, AI-powered humanoid customer service representative currently deployed at a commercial kiosk in Las Vegas.
How humanoid are we talking?
Very. Area features highly lifelike synthetic skin and utilizes over 17 distinct micromotors in its face alone to generate nuanced, expressive facial movements and microexpressions.
Wow.
It doesn't just recite facts, it uses advanced conversational AI layered with programmed emotional intelligence. Area can smoothly communicate in 15 different primary languages and an astonishing 147 regional dialects.
That is a capability no human employee will ever possess.
Exactly. The stated operational goal of deploying Area is to build genuine emotional rapport and provide flawless customer service across a massive array of cultures and demographics simultaneously.
Okay, here's my big concluding management question for you, the business student listening to all of this. If Moxie the robot is successfully doing all the hospital deliveries, and Aria the robot is seamlessly handling complex customer service in 147 dialects while making empathetic facial expressions, how does a modern business manager decide when to hire a human versus buying a robot?
That is the million-dollar question.
Right. How do we actually quantify the monetary and operational value of the human touch in our business models? Because if the patient actively wants a selfie with the delivery robot and the customer feels heard by the AI kiosk, maybe the human touch isn't as irreplaceable to the consumer as we historically thought it was.
That is precisely the paramount management challenge of the next decade. Leaders will have to constantly balance operational efficiency, capital expenditure costs, and the nuanced psychological comfort of their consumer base when deploying these systems.
What a profound place to wrap up this module. We have covered a truly massive amount of ground today, unpacking the mechanics and business implications of the Internet of Behaviors, digital twins in manufacturing, quantum computing, AI-driven drug discovery, and zero-emission flight. Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive into the technologies that will inevitably define the rest of your careers.
It has been a phenomenal discussion. And before you log off, please remember to like, subscribe, follow, and share the show with your cohort. And crucially, take a moment to leave a comment below because it helps you actively process this information by answering today's specific discussion question.
Here's the question I want you to answer. Think critically about your own intended career path or your current job. If you had the budget to implement just one technology we discussed today, whether it's an enterprise low-code programming platform, a digital twin of your supply chain, or leveraging the Internet of Behaviors for your marketing, which one would provide the absolute biggest competitive advantage for your specific business, and what is the very first managerial step you would take to integrate it? Tell us your strategy in the comments.
It's a fantastic way to apply these massive abstract concepts to your actual daily professional life.
And as a quick sneak peek for next time, we are moving away from the futuristic horizon and heading back down to the absolute foundational bedrock of modern business intelligence. Get ready to speak the language of databases as we launch into our final section, Module 29, Introduction to Data Analysis with SQL. You absolutely won't want to miss it.
It will be a highly practical, hands-on session.
So, until then, think back to that digital twin quietly practicing in the cloud or that predictive algorithm subtly tweaking your insurance rate. The future isn't just arriving, it's already actively optimizing itself. See you next time.